The Holy Gospel according to Matthew, the first chapter.
Glory to you, Lord.
Now the birth of Jesus the Messiah took place in this way. When his mother Mary had been engaged to Joseph, but before they lived together, she was found to be with child from the Holy Spirit. Her husband Joseph, being a righteous man and unwilling to expose her to public disgrace, planned to dismiss her quietly. But just when he had resolved to do this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, "Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for the child conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you are to name him Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins." All this took place to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet. "Look, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and they shall name him Emmanuel," which means, God is with us. When Joseph awoke from sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. He took her as his wife, but had no marital relations with her until she had borne a son, and he named him Jesus. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
For weeks we have been singing and praying, O come, Emmanuel." For weeks, in the midst of increasing darkness in our world, we have been lighting more and more candles on our wreaths. We've been hanging lights in our homes. We've been waiting for the light of Christ to come. For weeks we have been doing, or at least trying to do, those Advent things. Remember, waiting, preparing, repenting, being watchful, having patience, being hopeful and joyful, and on and on. For weeks we've been getting ready for the coming of Christ, for the coming of Emmanuel, which we remember is God with us. We're almost there. In fact, we actually just barely get those words in today's gospel reading. Mary bore a son and they named him Jesus. So let's break out some of those Christmas carols because the Christmas story is in sight. Yes, the Christmas story. Not the official Red Ryder carbine action 200 shot range auto air rifle or the leg lamp Christmas story, but the story of why we gather together to celebrate this season and every year at this time. The story of what we've been preparing for throughout Advent. The story of what we believe and what we proclaim as Christian people. And I believe that this is the story of Emmanuel, God with us. This is the story of when God came to us in human form to walk beside us in this world. This is the story of God entering this world in a very scandalous and very unlikely way, so that we know something big is happening. This is the story of God taking suffering upon himself so that we know that God suffers just as we do. This is the story from which we can tell Bette Midler that no, God is not watching us from a distance, but rather God is present with us here and now. Thanks be to God for this incredible story. For me, this brings hope. God with us. It brings me comfort and peace knowing that I am not alone. I mean, that is good news in itself. And I know that there are people here who would agree with me that knowing that God is right here, present among us, is good news for you as well. We believe that when God comes among us, there will be justice and righteousness and love. The sick will be healed, the lowly will be lifted up, the hopeless will have good news proclaimed to them, because God is here among us and with us. And through that, we believe and trust that this world is a better place and is getting better with every action. But still, on the other hand, knowing or believing that God is here with us or among us that's not necessarily good news. We may not want God that close to us, especially those times where we feel like we don't live up to our titles as children of God. We may not be done with our preparations this Advent, and we might need every last second until the moment we walk back through these doors on Christmas Eve to get ready. We may recall the judging side of God and wonder what God would actually think of us and the things that we do and don't do. And instead of feeling comfort, we start feeling condemnation. God can't know the real us. No matter which side of the coin you may fall on, and that may switch daily, if not maybe by the minute, I believe that both of those feelings are part of this Christmas story. Both of those understandings encompass how God is with us. Because yes, God can certainly bring comfort by being present. We've said we believe that the incarnation is important because it shows that God has experienced the very same things we have. God is with us in our joys and new life. God is with us in our sin and brokenness, and in our sufferings, and in our dyings. God brings about justice in a world that so desperately needs it. And God shows us all about this thing called love by first loving us in such a deep and profound way. But for everyone who's been through confirmation, as you should remember, what did Martin Luther say about God in each of his explanations of the Ten Commandments? We are to what? Fear and love God? Fear and love? Is that what we're experiencing, maybe? Because part of knowing that God is present with us, while it should restore some of that and show us love, it could also bring a level of fear as well. I've said it before, I believe that Jesus came to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And so those days where we're feeling way too comfortable and we think about God being with us, we may realize that God is pushing us to do some things that we don't necessarily care to do, doing things that make us uncomfortable and question why we are even following in the first place. We know that God may not be thrilled with all the actions we choose to do or the actions we choose not to do. We know that God is a truth teller, and some of those truths may not be so great for us to hear. But yet we trust that they come from a place of love and care for us and for God's creation. Take Joseph, for example, from our gospel story today. This is a story we know so well, but we often don't focus on Joseph's role. As he prepared to be married to Mary, he discovers that she is with child. Mary's pregnant, Joseph didn't do it, and people are about to find out. Unless they're towns like Colcamp where people would already know. But this news brings about shame. Not just for Mary, but for Joseph also. Think about where he is. Would he want God to be with him in that moment? God's presence, sure, it could bring some comfort and peace to him, but he may be too ashamed at this point to face God. As a devout Jewish man, would he want to stand before God and share this story and face the condemnation that he believes he's about to receive? Probably not. But yet we know the rest of this story. God was present with Joseph and Mary and was deeply involved in that whole thing, scandalous or not. And through that, God was incarnationally birthed into this world so that we truly know that no matter what, God is with us. That's this life of paradox in which we live as followers of Jesus. Having moments where God with us is a comfort and moments where God with us is just plain terrifying. That's the life that Rhett's being baptized into today. And that's the story that we've all been baptized into already. Fortunately, we have ancestors in the faith, like Joseph and Mary and all those people who we have been named after, who knew what it meant to fear and love God, so that we can all walk together, trusting that God is indeed with us in this season and always. Amen.